Oh, welcome to, I would say, a warm Washington, D.C., but also warm in hospitality. And this is our annual event, and we're delighted to honor Henry Kravis for what he has done between the two countries. And I'm also delighted to have Ambassador Shripriya, Arvind Krishna, Chairman of IBM. We have Johnny, we have Poorna from Bank of America. I have Ambassador Romer here. And rest of my board members from Tata's, Suryakant. I think it's important that we celebrate the recent election that took place in India. Over 642 million people voted. And one thing you can say is democracy corrects itself. And we saw that happening. But more important is the transition was smooth. There was no run on the Capitol. There was no run cases anywhere itself. And that shows the strength of the Indian democracy. So once again, a round of applause for the people of India itself. I think President Biden said that the US-India relationship is the most consequential of the 21st century. And what we are seeing on the state visit we had last year, over 170 plus different agreements or projects were initiated. In fact, today, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan with his team is in India talking about some of the ISET principles. And I think it's important that this relationship is defined not just purely on technology, it's defined on geopolitics, it's defined on economic opportunity, but more important, it's defined on people to people. We have roughly 5.1 million Indian Americans and around 1.2 million on H-1B visa in the United States. And we see the population contributing substantially to the economy, to the innovation, to the technology itself. So this is about celebration of the Indian-American friendship, the Indian Americans, what they do for the country itself. We do have a very packed program, so we're going to start moving things very fast. So I am going to bring in John Chambers, Chairman and Chairman Emeritus Cisco. John, over to you.
Thank you, my friend. You know, I want to start off by thinking back 8 years ago when we decided together to form the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum, not as a trade organization, but an organization that could be the model for how two countries could work together at all levels, not just business to business or government to government, to the individual citizens. And we outlined a dream that most people thought would be impossible to achieve. And it was fun watching it come together last year. It was truly, in terms of state visits, the Super Bowl of state visits. It was the ability to redefine what would be that strategic partnership that Mukesh talked about for the world and a model for the rest of the world that would benefit everyone in both of our countries. It was a vision that many people, when we outlined it, said there's no way we're going to be able to achieve. And I was thinking back, Mukesh, first I want to thank you and Gaurav. You've done an amazing job leading us. Pernu's taught me to give out compliments rather than financial raises. But your leadership over these 7 years has been truly amazing, and your confidence and direction. I'm thinking back to key events. I remember sitting on this very stage with Nancy Pelosi and talking about what did it really mean between our two countries, what was possible. Also with Vice President Pence, talking about the relationship and what could occur. And then my all-time favorite, Henry Kissinger, talking about how history repeats itself again and again. And then Minister Sitaraman, who I love. She's just an amazing woman with her vision of the future and direction. So it'd be so easy right now to say, let's just rest on our laurels. We don't have to change. We don't have to take risks. We don't have to be innovative again. And I think that'd be a tremendous mistake. And as great as these last 8 years have been, and as accurate as we've been in terms of what we outlined literally in Vibrant Gujarat in 2017, when we said in terms of what we could do together between our countries, India would become the fastest growing economy in the world. And back 8 years ago, very few people thought that was going to happen. We said that our relationship can be the most strategic in the world. And at a different level in terms of direction. And it became done to all of the 1.3, then up to 1.4 billion people in India, where they would participate from an economic standpoint in the future together. But I'm going to challenge us tonight to dream bigger. It'd be so easy to say, let's continue to do what we are doing. But when you look at fundamental change going on, the role that AI is going to play in the future, and several people in the cocktails beforehand said, if you talk about AI tonight, tell us what you think it could really be. AI will be the most fundamental change in technology during our lifetime, 3 to 10 times the speed of what we saw with the internet and cloud. It will disrupt every country, every business, every country, every business. Every citizen will become AI. And AI won't replace people. People with AI will replace people that don't have AI. And I think this is a chance for our countries to come together even closer, to have a bold vision of what's going to occur. When we said a year ago that India would be the largest GDP in the world, a lot of people were kind of surprised. To me, it was simple, pattern recognition. You look at the population age, you look at the minimums going on, and it was inevitable. But when you look at what could be done over the next 10 years together, you begin to see a country that will lay a foundation with the U.S. as its strategic partner to change the world in a way that's never been done before. Not only will India become the #1 economy in the world, but India will probably, by the end of this century, and I think it will be India's century of the future, will be 90% bigger than the GDP of China and probably 30% bigger than that of the US. But if we thought the advantage we could bring together to dream again and set goals that many people would say unattainable, and think, Mukesh, what we talked about the other day, and I'm going to give Raj full credit from Federal Express for the idea, what could we do together in terms of an industrial policy that would be built around the supply chain issues that we face, built around manufacturing, logistics together, and high tech, especially AI, of the big companies and the smaller companies. Hey, Dan, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us tonight. Senator Sullivan, a very, very good friend. But what we could do is think out of the box of what this means to both of our countries in terms of direction. I actually think my worry is that we'll get complacent, that we won't have the courage to change. So as you leave tonight, I'd like for each of you to think, what could we do? What could we do to make a difference on it? Could we pull key areas such as the industrial policy together? Could we leverage where this world is going in a way that is equal to what we've done over the last 8 years? But I want to do most important, I want to thank you, each of you, for your leadership. The leadership of high-tech companies, many people around the room, the leadership of startups, the ability to combine our education systems, and we're just getting started, Madam Ambassador, as you said, about our universities working together in terms of the direction. But the ability to think out of the box on how we change this world for the better. I think together we can be the defining economic growth engine. Together, the defining economic growth engine for this century. That's the challenge I'd like to leave us with. So with that, Mukesh, is it all right if I go ahead and jump to the next session?
Absolutely.
Well, let me start by just saying it's an honor to be with two friends that I've known for a very long time. Dan, I got to know you when you were the Senator of Alaska, and it's so easy to talk about all the committees he's on, from armed services to the veterans, to your focus on commerce, to your focus on China and other issues. But I'd rather start in terms of his personality. He is truly a person that just does the right thing. Somebody that's willing to take courageous risks. Somebody that John McCain was a very, very good friend of mine. And I was one of his 5 national co-chairs when he ran for president. And he said, this senator is going to make a difference, especially in terms of where we're going to go as a country. And John, I want you to get to know him because he will be a force. And he was right. You've got 3 daughters. One of them just graduated from Stanford on Saturday. Yo! Speaking from experience, that doesn't mean they come off the payroll, as you know. But I'd like to have you come up and join me. And then when Steve comes in, we'll just pick it up midstream and adjust along that line.
Thank you, John.
Dan, it's a pleasure.
Great to see you.
You're looking good.
Yeah, you too.
Please.
Thank you. Where would you like me? Right here?
I'll put you right in the middle.
Oh, in the middle.
So let's start with really what's on your mind today. What do you think are the major issues that you're most involved with and excited about seeing? So I'm talking the big picture first, and then we'll come back to the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum.
Well, first, let me...
By the way, your Wall Street Journal article was excellent
Oh,
on your
thank
trip
you.
through Asia.
Yeah,
It was
thank
really
you.
well done.
Thank you.
Steve,
Oh, you got
congratulations. Another very good friend, if I may introduce him. I just said unbelievably nice things about Dan and Steve. It's the same thing, because these are two people that I care greatly about. When you look at each of their strengths and you look at their families, Steve is a father of 4 and a grandfather of 6. He has an ability that is unique in government, that he is kind of in some ways very much like Prime Minister Modi. You have the ability to have a vision and inspire this vision could be done. Then you have the patience to work with all the groups to what could be done and reinforce it. And so from a business person's point of view, I'm extremely proud of the friendship that we've formed. And I could go on and on about each of their backgrounds and use all 20 minutes to talk about it, but I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Both of these individuals are like myself. They enjoy the outdoors and fishing. They're people that you can trust. And while I said and really meant it about Prime Minister Modi, I trust him so much, I trust him with my life, I would with both of you as well. So we were just about to hit the first question, which I was going to give to Dan in terms of what's on your mind this evening, that when you look at everything you're doing, what excites you the most?
Well, I'll take a crack at this, but first I just want to thank you, John and Steve. And I'm not kidding, and I don't say this normally in settings in Washington, D.C. These are two of my favorite people, not just in D.C., but in the country. So I'm very honored to be here, and they're great. Thank you. They're great Americans who we've done a lot of work together and a lot of things. And I know you asked the big picture. I do want to tell just one story on the U.S.-India relationship that was, to me, a really kind of special moment, kind of sent a chill down my spine. I had invited Ambassador Sarna, our former Indian ambassador to the United States, to come to Alaska in 2017. And we hosted him in the summer. It was great. We had this great kind of agenda for him. And we had a reception at a friend of mine's home in Anchorage. Beautiful place overlooking Cook Inlet. You know, John comes up to Alaska quite a lot, so he understands. Just
Yes.
Gorgeous. And we were both talking, and somebody asked me, well, you know, you have the Indian ambassador to the United States here. What's the vision? And I said, the vision is the world's biggest democracy and the world's oldest democracy have to do much more strategically together. That's the vision. Okay, and I'm not kidding. What happened next, probably only could happen in Alaska, maybe Montana. A bald eagle flew into this reception. It was an outdoor reception, and it was, if you've seen a bald eagle up close, they're huge, right? 6-7 foot wingspan, and it lands right on a tree above the ambassador's head. Now, you know the ambassador is a very tall guy, right? And I thought this bald eagle was going to kind of swoop in, and it just plotted it. And the whole place was like, whoa. So, and then at the end, they're like, hey, did you Alaskans cue that? Like, was that a cue? Is that how it works up here? So I think in the setting here, that's our goal. It's certainly my goal. We've been working on it for a long time. There's no one's working that issue harder than John Chambers. But to me, that is a really important goal that we should be continuing to pursue.
Steve, the same question, and understand these are very dear friends, and thank you for allowing me to call you both by your first name. The key things that are on your mind today, and then we'll begin to lay the groundwork for why the relationship between India and the U.S. is so important to you. But start with the big picture and then bring it back to that topic.
Sure. Well, thank you, and I'm glad I can call you John and not Mr. Chambers as well. John's been a hero of mine. I once upon a time was in the cloud computing business. As part of a startup, we took a company public and then sold to Larry Ellison once upon a time. Before that, I was with Procter & Gamble and lived in China for 6 years, launching brands over there. We took my sweet wife, Cindy, now we've been married 37 years. We took 2 little ones over there with us as early expats, launching American brands there in China, and we came home with 2 more kids. We had 2 kids born in China. My son likes to say he was made in China, he says, so that was, he has a pretty good sense of humor. He's a scratch golfer and a good kid, but I just have so much appreciated, John, talking with you and just thinking strategically about what's going on in the world. And I'll say this about my very good friend, Dan Sullivan, that goes back, we were elected together back in 2014, but let me tell you something about Dan Sullivan. A colonel in the Marine Corps. My father was in the Marine Corps as well. And Dan, thanks for your service as well to our country in the United States Marine Corps. But this is a very important moment, John, I think globally, so important here that we have clarity around who the good guys are and how we want to perpetuate these relationships and strengthen these relationships. And the good guys are the United States and India. And it's very important to think about what we need to do with India is bring the Quad relationship closer and push away the BRIC side of this. We want India and the United States should be the very best of friends with the deepest relationship. And you look at by every metric strategically, and as John and I were chatting, I'd taken many visits into China, leading congressional delegation visits, senators there. In fact, I told Mike Pompeo one time, the only thing more dangerous than a senator who's never been to China is one who was there 10 years ago, because the rate of change going on in China. But the strategic pivot, the important role that India plays, as Dan just mentioned, the largest democracy in the world, the largest population in the world. My father, 85 years old, his life was saved by an Indian doctor at MD Anderson. I'm very, very thankful for that. I mean, we have more doctors coming from India than any other country. Grateful for what they do, not only their incredible expertise, but also their compassion in terms of the relationship that we've been able to build with this great doctor. So it's very personal as well, John, for me, as I see what's happening. And with what's going on in the world, it's very important right now that China is watching what we are doing with India, and that we drive this relationship into much, much closer quarters.
So Dan, maybe following on the China comment, you've just been over there, you focus very much on the armed services in our country. You were the only member of the armed services in the Senate until you retired recently on it. How do you view the relationship, and how important is India strategically to us, and maybe some of your takeaways from your recent trip to Asia?
So, John, I think, I think it's really important to recognize we're in this new era of authoritarian aggression that's led by Xi Jinping and Putin and the Ayatollahs in Iran and Kim Jong-un in North Korea. They're all working together, right? We know that. And they're not, and a lot of these countries are motivated by historical grievances. They take aggressive actions based on those. They have no compunction about invading their democratic neighbors. And I think this new era, it's really a return to the era of authoritarian aggression, is going to be with us for years and decades to come. And from the U.S. perspective, I think we need to face this with strategic resolve and confidence. And the reason we should have confidence is because our strategic advantages relative to these dictatorships are so significant. And one of them, one of the most important, is our network of allies that we have worked with for decades, based on the same values. And that's where I think the strategic relationship between the United States and India is so important, because we share the same values and we share the same strategic interests. I always like to mention, when you think about vulnerabilities of these dictatorships, one of the biggest is that they fear their own people. They fear their own people. Those dictators will never do what Prime Minister Modi just did, which is stand for elections and let the people choose. And the strategic interests, I think, between democracies, Steve mentioned the Quad, to me are something from the United States perspective, but I also believe India it just makes strategic sense moving forward. You know, I served in the Bush administration under Condoleezza Rice. I was one of her assistant secretaries of state, focusing on the economic, energy, finance, trade issues in the State Department. As a matter of fact, I just had lunch a couple days ago with Condi out at Stanford. And when you look at what the Bush administration did, that was really in many ways a kind of turning point in the U.S.-India relationship with the U.S.-India Civil Nuclear Agreement. Secretary Rice, of course, played a really important role on that. And then we did, during the Bush administration, launch the Quad. But that kind of took a little nap, I think, during the Obama years. The Trump administration tried to re-energize that. And the Biden administration, to its credit, has now moved that to the leader level. And to me, when you look at the biggest democracies in the Indo-Pacific and what we can do together, Australia, India, the United States, and Japan, it is a huge strategic imperative that I think we need to double down on. One of the big areas that I care a lot about as Alaska Senator is energy. Think about what we can be doing, just those 4 countries with regard to energy. All forms of energy, oil, natural gas, renewables, the high technology that goes into some of the renewable sector. That is another area that I've been pressing the Biden administration on. Hey, you need to deepen and broaden and make more concrete the relationship in the different areas of the Quad. And to me, energy is one that has enormous, enormous upside benefits. Just in the area of LNG, just think of that. The United States and Australia are 2 of the biggest exporters of LNG. Japan is one of the biggest importers. Clean burning American energy could do so much, I think, favorably with regard to India as it builds out its natural gas sector, which I think is really important. So these are just some ideas, but the key reason why the strategic relationship, from my perspective, is imperative but also gaining ground is at the end of the day we share the same values, and that's the most enduring relationships that you can have anywhere in the world.
You know, you've kind of touched on it, Dan, and Steve, I'm going to ask you to follow up any additions you'd like to make to the comments, but part of any political scenario is what does this mean to our local citizens? And we all understand the big picture. But when you think about it, you're explaining to the citizens of Montana, you come from a startup state. You've got more high-tech startups growing at a faster rate than almost any other state in the nation. You came with a business background, et cetera. But what does it really mean when you talk to citizens in Montana why this relationship is important, but beyond the geopolitical issues, the economic growth issues?
Well, John, thank you. And if you ever watch the show Yellowstone or see what's going on TV, you're going to see why people want to move to Montana and Alaska. They're 2 beautiful places. And the best talent is going to want to live in the most beautiful places. And so suddenly you've got a place like Montana where our quality of life is becoming now an important way to attract and retain some of the best talent in the world, because you're just minutes away from some of the best fly fishing, some of the best hiking, some of the best mountain climbing, some of the best skiing in the United States. But when I come from a Montana perspective, our #1 industry is agriculture. So we have this high-tech side of us now that is exciting, but agriculture is our largest economic driver. And so many of you may not know that Montana is the #1 producer of pulse crops in the United States. And so we've been working with the Indian government about how do we reduce tariffs there to open up more trading opportunities for pulse crops. And I'm very pleased we had some great traction there. We now have a level playing field with other countries around the world as it relates to pulse crops. So that's a very tangible, important piece for Montana, because India is the #1 consumer of pulse crops. We're the #1 producer in the United States, so there's a natural place to work together. Very grateful that we made some tremendous progress after a visit there in India I made back in 2021. But pivoting back over on the tech side and the innovation side as well, I stepped back and I had this conversation with John a couple of years ago looking at STEM grads. You think about the innovation ecosystem that we've got to develop here within our countries to continue to lead the world in technology. Look, the bright future with AI and so forth. And I looked at, China graduates about 5 million STEM graduates. I'm a chemical engineer by degree, so I'm very pro-STEM. And I believe in it. I've lived it. But China is graduating 8 times more STEM grads than we are in the United States. Where in the world would we be best to partner to develop close relationship where there's a lot of STEM grads graduating? How about India, with about 3 million to 4 million STEM grads a year? So between the United States and India, our all-in STEM grads there are about equivalent to China, using some very rough numbers. And so I think that's an exciting part of what's happening. You look at a third of the Silicon Valley engineers are from India. They have Indian backgrounds. And so there's a natural, I think, relationship here that we can work together. When I was over in Delhi in 2021, we were at the U.S. Embassy. I had this phone with me. It's my smartphone. I've had this for 25 years, the same number, not the same phone, the same number. Back from my startup days in cloud computing, I've kept this same phone. It's the same phone that my grandkids FaceTime me on. But I was able to bring that with me to that evening at the Roosevelt House. This phone was with me at the Roosevelt House. Look, I can't bring this phone into China. That says a lot right there in terms of the trust and the relationship and why it's strategically very important that the United States and India continue to work together, of course, on the agriculture side, but also relates to developing the innovation ecosystem for the next 20, 25 years.
Dan, take us the next step. When you think about AI technologies, and I think as recently as 7 or 8 years ago, many of us would say China was going to lead in 15 of the top 20 technologies in the world, and I thought it was their hand to win. They've made a number of missteps with the comments that you and Steve have both made. If you look what our countries could do together, we could move with the speed that would guarantee us 1-2 spots in the world, but also really share with all of our citizens of individual states what could be done here. How do you think about that from a defense point of view when you really look at how fast the technology is going to move? Where is the U.S.? What do you feel best about? What do you feel that the U.S. and India need to do better?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, John. And we, on the Senate Armed Services Committee, we just marked up what's called the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. So that bill moves every year into Congress. That's 65 years in a row that bill, that'll be voted into law by the end of this year. So the Senate marked up its version. And to be honest, we have a lot of challenges on the military side, in my view, from the United States perspective. Look, I'm not going to be here to kind of dump all over the current administration, but they have not been, in my view, taken the defense component of our national security nearly seriously enough. President Biden has put forward 4 budgets in a row that are inflation-adjusted cuts to the Department of Defense. The current budget right now shrinks the Army, shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Marine Corps of the United States. That is the wrong direction, given the challenges that we see right now. To me, the good news that exists between the U.S.-India relationship on the defense side can cover the whole gambit of what we need in terms of technologies, but also what we need in terms of basic warfighting capability. First, and it's really interesting to see how this happened, but the combatant command that is the top joint forces for the United States used to be called the Pacific Command. In 2018, during the Trump administration, we officially renamed that Indo-Pacific Command. And I think that just woke up a lot of people in the United States saying, wait a minute, this isn't just PACOM, as we called it, this is Indo-PACOM because of India, because of the strategic importance of India. So we are now doing much more military exercises between the United States and India's military. One area that I've been really, really focused on where we need help. The United States has to do a much better job. Our Navy is shrinking. Our ability to produce Navy warships has atrophied. We have a huge crisis in not only Navy shipbuilding, but Navy maintenance of ships. And what has been happening is, normally for U.S. Navy ships to get heavy-duty maintenance, they come back to the United States. Well, a number of us have been saying, well, wait a minute. If we have U.S. Navy ships in the Indo-PACOM region, why can't they get heavy-duty maintenance with our allies in their shipyards? And that is something that actually in this bill we're authorizing more to do. And we had a couple U.S. Navy ships that recently went through maintenance in India. And that is a smart idea with our allies, right? It makes sense. So that's one area. And then the other area that I think is really exciting, and Steve already mentioned it, I'm kind of out of my league here talking in between two of the smartest tech guys in the country, but it is in this area of technology. We have seen, and I think it's an exciting comparative advantage, again, we have in the United States, we now have a tech community that is very interested in helping with regard to our military. Now, some of you know 10 years ago that wasn't the case. We had a lot of folks in Silicon Valley who were in the tech industry, tech finance, who were kind of saying, hey, Pentagon, we're not interested in helping you. My view on that was it's a free country. You can do whatever you want, but you shouldn't be helping the Chinese and not your own home country. That's changed. And we have so many opportunities now with tech companies who want to make sure our ability to protect ourselves from a national security perspective, to have lethal military forces, is starting to have a lot of interest. It's a huge comparative advantage we have over China, over Russia, but we need to do it with our other tech-savvy allies. And I think doing that with India, particularly in the technology space that relates to national security, AI, quantum computing, is a natural next step that we all should be working on.
Steve, I know that you've got to make another commitment, and we've taken up more of your time than I asked for, but I'd love both of your closing thoughts. Perhaps first on where do you see this relationship 10 years from now? And then secondly, maybe asking the audience or giving us constructive feedback on what you think we can do better in affecting interfacing to our government, to India, getting our messages out. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you, John. And I think the story of India is an undertold story. I think we need to get out there and tell the story about what's going on in India. I think there are perceptions of India
I would agree.
that are not aligned with the reality of what's happening. When I come back from my visits to India, it's been jaw-dropping, truly, to see the incredible amount of innovation going on, world-class. And I think, and maybe to sum it all up, what India has and the United States have, as Dan talked about comparative advantage, you always look at what's the sustainable comparative advantage that allows you to win medium and long term. And I think what sets our two countries apart, first of all, is just the incredible amount of talent. Just the human capital is the most important capital of any nation. The fact is, there's incredible human talent in India and the United States. But what sets us apart from maybe a challenge of China is India and the United States are free. We have the rule of law. We share the common values of democracy. That is what allows the innovation ecosystem to long-term win and allows us to succeed. You think about the global challenges. As Dan mentioned, you think about BRICS, talking about Russia, China, Iran, are players there. This is a moment in the world with tyrants on the rise when we need moral clarity and for the good guys to be getting closer together as we think of what's at stake right now as I said, as a grandfather of 6 little grandchildren, you think a lot about their futures. And I'm optimistic about where capital will continue to go, exchange between the countries. And let's not forget here in the United States, we have a healthcare shortage. We don't have enough doctors. India, the talent that you're being generated there, the number one source of doctors are coming from India. They're some of the best in the world, and that's something I'm grateful for. Thanks, John.
My pleasure. Dan, bring us home.
Well, there's a lot of discussion on the issue of values, and I think it's the critical strategic force that's going to continue to make the U.S.-India relationship converge even more. And I think we have to work on it. India, sometimes the government can say, hey, we don't want to be aligned with anybody. There's a long history there. We know that. We have to be respectful of that. But I think the values just drive the strategic interests. The thing that I get excited about as an American is the other thing that I think will drive the strategic interest is when you look at the American Indian community. We have senior White House officials who you're going to hear from here in a second. Hi, Neera. You have people in terms of Nikki Haley running for president, maybe a vice president. I mean, you look at the source of the strength in the rising of this great community in our own country. I just retired from the Marine Corps after 30 years. One of the speakers at my retirement ceremony was a one-star general named Balin Ayar. Some of you know Balin, top guy in the U.S. Air Force, youngest one-star. I served under him in Afghanistan. And now he's the CEO of a really prominent tech AI company. I mean, it's everywhere. And I think that is also, this great Indian American community is going to be a key source of continuing to drive the strategic relationship between the United States and India even closer. And it's just very, very exciting.
I want to thank you both. Please join me in welcoming, I think, two of our great senators.
Thanks a lot, Doug. Thank you.
Steve, thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10:30.
Okay. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Senator Daines and Senator Sullivan. Now, please welcome Ambassador Sri Priya Ranganathan, Chargée d'Affaires at the Embassy of India, for her remarks.
Good evening, friends. It's a great pleasure to see so many friends and very distinguished friends at that in the audience. Beginning with, of course, my dear friend Mukesh, the others from the USISPF, John Chambers. I see PDNSA John Finer there. Advisor Neera Tandon. Others from the audience, so many people who are good friends, and I'm just so pleased to be here. Congratulations, first of all, to the USISPF team for bringing this amazingly energetic audience together. And I think this turnout today really is a demonstration of just how hard the Chamber has worked and how much its work is valued across communities in India as well as in the US. Just been hearing from many friends here in DC that this has been an astonishingly hot June in the city. And I must say that this is very, very balmy in comparison to what we are dealing with in India right now. Temperatures have been above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and it went up to about 122 on one fine day in Delhi. And it was in the middle of that heat that we went through what has been noted by some of the speakers before me as the world's largest democratic exercise. The Indian elections were conducted across many phases. 650 million people came out to vote out of an eligible 940 million. We had 5.5 million electronic voting machines, which were deployed at over 1 million polling stations around the country, with 15 million polling staff coming out there to make sure that the elections were conducted in a free, fair, and transparent manner. And I think the results were there for all to see. This is the 18th straight elections that we have had after independence, in which the people of India have been able to express their choice freely. And this has really reinforced our faith and our trust in the integrity of the process. And the results have been really phenomenal. In just the first 2 weeks of this month, after the election process was complete and the election results were announced, we have seen intense activity back home. the new NDA government has taken oath. We have seen a lot of continuity across key offices with some changes, and we can confidently expect that there will be broad continuity on the policy front, whether it is in the reform process, whether it is on the business, education, or infrastructure development side, and also a broad approach on the foreign policy side. A key plank of that has been building, reinforcing our close cooperation and partnerships with like-minded partners around the world, and I would say it would be no secret when I say that the relationship with the US is absolutely top priority for us. The fact that we have already witnessed in just the 2 weeks since the election results and the coming into office of the new government, we have witnessed high-level political contact between India and the US. Prime Minister Modi and President Biden met on the margins of the G7. APNSA Sullivan is in Delhi right now for discussions with the Indian leadership. And I'm very certain that the embassy is going to be very busy in the coming weeks, as we are going to see a lot of activity and a lot of exchanges between India and the US. I just want to take a cue from what the chairman of the USISPF has said a short while ago, and that was to say that I think most of us in the room here would be aware of just how far the India-US relationship has traveled. Just a few decades ago, much of our time was spent in managing this relationship, managing in a good way as well as in a not so good way. Today, I would say that we have reached the stage of actively seeking each other out. When we are confronted with challenges, when we are confronted with difficulties, we try and see how we can use the power of the India-US relationship to really tackle these challenges and find the best possible way forward. And if I look at any sector of our relationship, whether it is defense, whether it is space, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is supply chains, energy, education, health, the nature of the conversation is such that I feel that we are intrinsically now coming to understand just how much we can contribute to national security in each of these fronts to each other. And by doing so, how we can contribute to global security and global stability. The sights of India remain very firmly on our goal of Viksit Bharat, that is becoming a developed nation by 2047, which is the year that the nation will turn 100. In my opinion, a key contributor to the realization of this vision will be the partnership that we are able to sustain and reinforce with the United States of America. Again, taking a cue from those who have gone before me, I would like to use my time here rather than just celebrating the successes that we have had, and we have had a lot of successes. I would like to just trigger a few thoughts on how we can build on this goodwill and the equities that we have generated in this partnership and take this to the next level in the months and the years to come. First, I'd like to highlight the collaboration that we have already woven in technology and innovation. This is really the need of the hour and what lies at the heart of the India-US initiative on critical and emerging technologies. ICET is a milestone that signals that we have a partnership of trust and a shared vision of creating open, accessible, auditable, and secure technology ecosystems. Artificial intelligence and associated technologies are changing the playing field every single day, and by working together, we can really seize the opportunity to be able to craft the way in which we deal with these technologies so that the needs of our people are able to be advanced. Initiatives like IndusX, which seek to foster collaboration, can be usefully replicated across any number of other verticals. The second aspect pertains to our private enterprises. What both governments have been advocating, exactly what the USISPF has also been trying to do. We need to have our companies working closely on the very areas that we have prioritized, and that will determine our success in the coming century. In fields like defense, space, communications, biotech, our companies must see in each other the partners of first choice. We have had some great advances, some great successes that we have been able to celebrate, whether it is the GE HAL 414 deal, whether it is the investments by First Solar in India, by VSK Energy in the USA. But I think we need to get more of our companies to be moving forward and expanding the envelope more and more and more. Thirdly, leveraging our respective strengths in digital public infrastructure. This has become a formidable force today, and the rollout in India has demonstrated its incredible power, the power for rapid financial inclusion, for service delivery and instant payments, in other words, technology for governance, for community service, and for markets. By working together, we believe that India and the US can offer attractive digital platforms to friends across the globe. One final point before I close. India and the US can and must work together to craft common rules for the road, for the pressing issues of the day, and set a common global agenda with our commitment to a rules-based world order. Friends, the potential of the India-US partnership is truly limitless, and I have absolutely no doubt that each and everyone present in this room today will be active partners in our quest to tap into this potential so that we are really able to lift this relationship to the level that it ought to be at. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Ranganathan. Now, please welcome Ms. Neera Tandon, Domestic Policy Advisor to President Joe Biden, and Ambassador Tim Romer, Executive Director and Strategic Counselor at APCO and a board member at USISPF.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How is everybody out there? Everybody doing well? Great job on the last couple panels, and Neera and I are really excited to be with you. Neera and I are long-time, I don't say old friends anymore, I say long-time friends. And yesterday during Father's Day, I was bragging to my wife that I have had 3 of the hottest tickets to things in DC and around America in the last year. We got tickets to go be with President Biden and Mr. Modi for the state dinner, which went beautifully. Second, we got Taylor Swift concert tickets, which was...
You're really building this up here, my friend.
And then thirdly, to be at this dinner tonight, which is a great, great tribute to U.S.-India relations. Neera, you have had so many prestigious titles, president of a great think tank here in town. You're the director of one of the president's most important policy councils. You have a JD degree from Yale University, all these great accomplishments, and you're doing one of the most important jobs in Washington right now on the Domestic Policy Council. We heard from senators about strategic convergence all the time. And we tend to think about it in terms of defense and technology, but it's also so true that it goes straight to many of the issues that you're working on. People skills, technology companies in America. Most of our technology, many of our top-notch technology companies in the United States are being run by Indian Americans, many members of Congress. So tell us, Neera, what is it that is so important about this relationship in politics and business, and how do we keep growing this and improving this in the future?
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Ambassador Romer. It is great to be with you, and I have learned a lot from you over the years about the U.S.-India relationship, so I really appreciate being here, and I also just want to say thank you to my good friend Mukesh. I was at a dinner a few years ago, which was quite small, a little bit smaller than this one. So it really is a testament to the relationship, Mukesh's leadership, obviously, and everyone engaged here about the maturity of the relationship. And I guess I would say a few things. First of all, this is my 3rd White House. I started my career in the Clinton White House. And in the Clinton White House, there were, I think a handful of Indian Americans in the entire executive office of the president. And today, I feel very fortunate to be among so many leaders. There's a handful of assistants to the president who are Indian Americans. And as you said, we have Indian Americans as leaders of companies in Indian Americans in Congress. We have a record number. We're at 5 members of Congress, and perhaps a few more after November. And I will say, not to age myself, but when I was going into politics, a few decades back, I didn't see many role models because I think as first generation, we tend to, my parents were always asking me why I didn't become a lawyer, or partner, or doctor, or a business leader. But I think what's a real tribute to the U.S.-India relationship, and to build a little bit on John's remarks, I think so much of the values that the senator spoke to, the values that we share between India and the United States, the values of entrepreneurialism, the values of really a focus on education and opportunity, the values of innovation, and I really think it is this convergence, which is a convergence of values, which have allowed so many Indians to want to come to the United States, to be the leaders of companies here. You have so many stories of people who've come to get an education here and stay and innovate and lead. And I really do think, I was thinking about this recently, Center for American Progress hosted Vice President Biden about a decade ago before he was going to India, and he did a speech with us before his trip. And he really focused in on this specific issue, which is, you think about India and you think about the children who are going to school to think through those innovations in the future, and just that spirit of connection that brings a lot of those dreamers to come to the United States, get an education here, to lead in creating innovations, not just for the United States, but for the world. And so I very much see these values, the kind of connection of values driving that experience. And just when you think about the IIT model of India, and just the amazing number of business leaders that I just know many from the IIT in India who've created companies here, who are creating innovations here. That's an education model really not just for India, but for innovation in the world. And so I just think that just creates that dynamic that has been helpful, obviously, to Indian Americans in America, but just remember what an enrichment it has been for America itself.
So one of the great things that India has going for it, especially in relation to China, is the demographic dividend. About 65% of the Indian population is under 35. In the United States, we see President Biden investing in infrastructure for competitiveness, for economic growth, the people skills that need to drive the technology, doing some wonderful things in those areas. But the skilling part of this, Neera, how do we bring the technology and the people and the skilling, the education together, whether that's community colleges, whether that's welding and pointing, whether that's our elite college education? I know you're thinking a lot about this. This is one of the great areas of convergence between the United States and India, too.
Yeah, so of course the president has an Invest in America agenda that is really focused on manufacturing, renewable energy, but really I'd say how we build a non-college career pathway into good middle-class jobs, which we are very proud of. But I also think it's critical to remember that we need innovations in these spaces. So we have to think of the entire terrain, which is education, higher education, career-connected learning, non-college pathways. The president will say, I am not here to break news about announcements we will make because then I too would get fired, like John Feiner could get fired if he talked about Jake Sullivan's announcements. But I'm not here to announce the president will be making announcements tomorrow related to employment pathways for people in the United States. And I think one of the principles animating that the announcements tomorrow is the fact that we have a very odd situation in the United States where we attract people from all over the world to come to our phenomenal higher education system. And then in many ways, we do everything we can in a sort of upside down crazy policy to send them back. And that is really makes no sense for innovation, for growth, for our dynamism. And the president will be taking some steps on that topic tomorrow. And I feel like
You're teasing us, Nira. Do you want to say anything more?
no. I feel like if I say more, John will tell the comms team, and I'll get in so much trouble. But I will say, what I can say is really the value of that is to say, in America, we should be proud of the fact that we attract global talent. This is part of the unique value proposition of America, and that we should then use that talent for innovation into the future, to build businesses, to create economic growth, instead of sending people, in essence, repudiating that skill, that innovation, that hunger to be part of our economic growth.
So that's a great point, Nira. Politics, to me, is all about storytelling. It's all about communicating with people a story, not a figure, not a spending detail, a story that connects to their gut. And Nira was just talking about that. I think it was Cal and Duke that did a study 10 years ago that showed that 23% of technology jobs in America are created by immigrants coming from India and other places in Asia. How do we better tell this story about people coming here legally and coming here to build jobs, create value, do more to achieve the American dream for the middle class? What's your best shot at that, Nira?
So I guess I'll try to, how do I put this? I will say, I think we live in a time where there's just a lot of energy or focus on lose-lose propositions, or really win-lose propositions, or my gain is at your expense, or your gain is at my expense. And I think what we have to do is be clearer about how systems of reform can mean economic growth for everyone. And that we really have to push against the kind of zero-sum game that we often see in politics and policy. So that's why I do think it's important to tell the story of how we create economic growth for large numbers of people when we have rational immigration policies, or we have strong investments that go between countries. Because I do think for a variety of reasons, change is scary. People become anxious. It's easy to be fearful. But the antidote to fear is, a vision, facts. I do think facts matter. I still believe facts matter.
I agree.
But I think it is explaining why my success is also your success, or your success is also my success. When we have people who come, they aren't replacing someone, they are adding. And I think this is why the story of innovation and it's such an American, and I say that consciously, American story, that we have a country where the greatest, innovators in the world want to come, build businesses, and expand opportunity. And they build businesses that employ Americans and people around the world. but we don't want to be we lose so much as a country. We lose as a country, and and other countries lose as well, if we become a place where we, we turn those future AI specialists or innovators away, because then we become not just a smaller country or someone whose values are different, but we will be a less rich country, a less innovative country, a less of an economic engine for the rest of the world. This has been a win-win-win, the cycle of innovation, and we just have to remind people over and over again, even when they have many voices telling them to fear others, to really that is a part of our success.
So last question. We've heard about, from John, we heard about strategic convergence and strategic autonomy, and we've learned about, the values that we all share between our two great countries. And you bring up a great strategic trust here, Neera, how we are trusting each other more and more between these two great countries that have elections all the time. How do you build this trust into more agreements, whether it's Jake over there working on technology, whether it's our Secretary of Defense working on trade issues, strengthening issues on the defense side, or whether it's in your domestic policy council?
I guess I'll amplify something John said, which is, I really think that it's the people in this room. And I remember, 20, 30 years ago, I would go to India, and, you'd talk to basically elites who would kind of share the, long-held view of suspicion of the U.S. government, and, with a fair amount of cynicism about the U.S. But then you'd, meet innovators, business leaders, people, the diaspora, people who had returned from the diaspora, who really saw the United States in a very different light. And I really do believe the diaspora has played a huge role in building this relationship to where it is today. Yes, please applaud.
Well said.
Business leaders that have gone back and forth that have played a huge role. Even in times where which is not today, in past moments where there have been really fraught tensions even between the United States and India, or, suspicion or concern, it's the people of really both countries. But many Indians I know have family relatives in the United States that have helped shape the vision that they have of the U.S. And that's why I think, how do we solve our problems? How do we take this relationship even farther? Of course, it's it's President Biden's leadership, it's India's leadership, but fundamentally also, it is the leadership of people in this room and, the Indian Americans here, the sense of pride that I know Indians have of their congressional leaders, their White House staff. There's just a deep connection to how India perceives the U.S. through how the U.S. treats Indians. And I think that is fundamentally important as we make progress forward.
Neera Tandon, please join me in thanking her for a great presentation. Thank you, Neera.
Thank you, Ms. Tandon and Ambassador Romer. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the award ceremony portion of the program, to be followed by dinner. Please turn your attention to the screen for a brief video commemorating Mr. Henry Kravis, co-founder and CEO of KKR, for his commitment to the India growth story.
May I invite John and Henry on the stage? May I invite Arvind Krishna, Chairman, IBM?
All right. I also know that we are between this and your dinner, but I think you're going to find it entertaining. Look, the video did a lot of tribute to what Henry's been doing in India. But do many of you know that he pretty much created the model of what we would now call private equity, private debt in a company that goes back just shy of 50 years, if I remember it right. On a very personal note, he helped mentor, I'll use the word train, though Lou might react to that. The person who became one of IBM's greatest CEOs, Lou Gerstner, worked for Henry right before he came to IBM. And when you think about now, they're far beyond PE. They're PE, they're investors, they're private debt. They're actually a very large operating entity as well. People kind of forget that. And I think that all of these have had a massive impact on, I'll use the word economic diplomacy as it goes around. And India has certainly been a massive beneficiary of that. But thinking about this and thinking about the kind of questions that this room might find interesting, Henry, as you look at what's happening economically around the globe, any comments for the room on that? And also sort of what is its impact and India's role in all of this economic miracles that are happening around the globe?
Arvind, thank you for having me here, and thank you for the leadership for offering this award to me. Thank you, John and Mukesh. Thank you very much. I love India. We're going to start with that, so I make it very clear. I've been going to India since 1989. I've gone practically every year until COVID hit. India is a really interesting country to me. I find it fascinating. And to me, in many ways, it's like an onion. The more you peel it back, the more you learn, the more interesting it is. And it's a fascinating country. In fact, I spent 3 Christmases in India. I've been down the south in Cochin, up to Srinagar, and lots of places in between. The world is an interesting place right now. Somebody described it to me when I asked the question, how do they see the world? And they said, you know, about those guys in the circus where they have those plates on a stick and they're spinning them around. And they said, you know, really concerned that one's going to fall off. And it sort of put it in perspective for me. Look, right now the U.S. is reasonably strong. I think inflation will probably be stickier than most people think. I think it's going to stay here longer. Goods are coming down, but I think services will be up for a long time. I think wages will stay up. I just think it's going to be a stickier time there. Europe's a little upside down. You know, it wasn't so long ago, 2009, 2010 period, that if you think about Europe, there were about 5 countries that were going to go in the ocean, and everybody was saying, well, they just won't be around, and that was Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Ireland. What's the fastest growing country right now? Well, it's Greece. What are the slowest growing countries in Europe right now is Germany and France. France is a little upside down now that President Macron has called for a snap election, so to be determined what happens there. So I think you're going to see continued slow growth in Europe. Asia's a different thing. You know, it's interesting. Take Japan, for example, and we focus right now Pan-Asia, and really the 2 bookends for us, the most interest to us as far as investments today, India on one side, Japan on the other side. 2 totally different economies, different countries for lots of different reasons. But In Japan, finally, they're having a little inflation. That's actually good for that country. China's exporting deflation because they have so much capacity right now. Just take their EV industry, they have about a 65% utilization rate right there. So that's awfully low, and they're dropping prices, and I think that will continue for a long time. They have their own problem with housing. They have about 700,000, homes that need to be sold somehow. I'm not sure how it's going to all work out, but they have, and that's, wait, I gave you the wrong number. It's $700 million worth of homes that need to be sold. And right now, they have basically set up an incentive program for about 10% of that, and that's about it. So they've got to somehow work through all of that excess capacity in the housing industry. So, overall, what I would say, Arvin, is there's enormous opportunity today. I don't happen to agree when I read all these surveys that say that the next generation, and you can name any country practically, they don't think the generation will do as well as the last generation. I don't happen to agree with that because I think technology in and of itself, which you know something about, is going to really change that. And I think people will look back in history and say, well, this was an incredible opportunity. I love investing when everybody's looking at their feet and saying, oh, woe, poor us, the world's coming to an end. Same thing happened in Europe during the global financial crisis. I spent a lot of time in Spain. I wanted to find out if I really believed that Spain was going to go in the ocean, and came away and said, absolutely not. And we concluded, let's dump back up the dump truck and put as much capital into Spain as we can. That's how we invest. Find areas that you have conviction in that you do not think are going away. And I put India right at the top of that list.
Well, and I think the track record speaks for itself on those convictions. So talking about India, what are you thinking about the potential of the Indian market with respect to what has been talked about sort of briefly before in terms of the US-India economic alignment, and which sector, if any, would you point out is got opportunity?
Well, lots of opportunity in India. First of all, you have a very good educated workforce. You have a young population. You have about 860 million people that are on the internet. And you have a lot of terrific entrepreneurs. And so I get really excited about it. The areas where we're focusing our effort right now in India is on the consumer, the upgrade of the consumer. The consumer wants to go from where they were and be able to afford more. There have been so many good things that President Modi has been able to, or Prime Minister Modi has been able to do that have been absolutely fantastic for the average person. The idea that they have an identification card now makes a huge difference. We take it for granted in America. Let me tell you, that's a huge thing in India. People have bank accounts now, which they didn't have before. And so we were really focusing on where is the consumer going? What can we do to help that? We're focused also on a lot of AI, focused on financial services and healthcare in particular, and some cybersecurity that we're focused on, where we might be able to combine that with some things that we're doing in the States.
That sounds pretty robust across a pretty wide variety. So you mentioned the Prime Minister, but we know that the government has been making a lot of efforts to make doing business easier. It wasn't always so easy to do business, especially for foreign firms. Do you see that making an impact on how you invest and in the ability for investors to put money into India?
Oh, without a doubt. It's interesting. Early days when I would go to India, I wasn't sure we'd be able to put any money into India. The fact that infrastructure has improved dramatically, and that's huge there, and that was one of their biggest problems. Everything took much longer to get built. The roads were terrible, so moving goods from one location to another was difficult. So infrastructure has become substantially better. The GST tax is just huge. That cut out a lot of bureaucracy, cut out a lot of corruption, quite frankly, and that's very positive. So yes, let me give you an example. You know, the first time I met with Prime Minister Modi, he came to New York shortly after that he was elected. And there were 6 of us that were asked to meet with him one-on-one. And I was one of them chosen, and they said, you have 20 minutes. So I had to think, well, what am I going to talk to the Prime Minister about? First of all, he's going to think that KKR is the Calcutta Knight Riders. And let me tell you, I had to take off KKR off my Google search because all I would get is the name of every player on that team. And so I said, I've got to explain who we are. He's not going to know. He'll understand GE and BlackRock and so forth. So I explained that to him. And then I said, I don't think that your country will ever grow to its potential unless you have a broad and deep capital market, because you don't have it. You have a bank market right now, and you need to have a broad and deep capital market. For example, you limit the ownership of insurance companies. Why? 25% at that time, and then now it's moved up significantly. I said, and the reason your capital market, I think, is not as broad and as deep as it should be is you don't have a bankruptcy law. He said to me, what do you mean we don't have a bankruptcy law? I said, you don't have a bankruptcy law. He called over some fellow from his entourage who was on the side there from the financial department. And he says, Kravis here says we don't have a bankruptcy law. Is that true? He said, yes, sir, that is true. So he asked me, he said, well, would I put something together for him to, that he could then think about? And I said, okay, and figure we'll put something together and it'll go into ether. We'll never see anything. We put something together, got it to him, and literally within about 2.5 months, he got it through the lower house. I saw him in between, and he said, you know, I've gotten it through the lower house, and I think we will get it through the upper house. Got it through the upper house, and it's gotten a bit better and better each year since it's been in place. But that was a huge stumbling block, and they didn't even appreciate the fact that that was what was causing the contraction of their capital markets. So he's a doer, and I asked him afterward, I said, I've got to congratulate you, because I don't think we could get something like that through the U.S. Congress as fast as you have gotten it through a very difficult government, lower house and upper house in India. He said, well, I didn't know if we could get it done, but I thought it was important enough to try it. And it's gotten successively better as it's gone along. But you have a man that wants to improve this country. You have a man that really wants to support investment in the country. We put a lot of money into infrastructure as an example because he wants private investment there. We put money into financial services because he wants money there and he wants expertise there. So it is a terrific country to do business in my view.
I think those are great, great examples of this. So, coming to something that was explored and stated by the senators, by John, by Neera, by the ambassador, it seems like the US-India relationships are feeling different today. Part of it is what's going on in all geopolitics, and India is taking a larger and larger role, certainly across the global south, but probably even larger than that when we think about the Quad got mentioned, various other forums are mentioned, the role that India has begun to play in APEC and many other forums. Do you have any view on where you see the US-India relationship going as you look down the road?
Well, first of all, I think it will continue to grow. It's multidimensional. If you think about our values and India's values, we believe very strongly in democracy. We just had a major election And to get as many people to vote in India is phenomenal when you think about it. We have an election coming up. So we absolutely believe in that, people to people. You know, there are 5 million plus Indian Americans today. There's 270,000 students with visas in the United States. Last year alone, I think, was a record of Indians looking for visas to come to the U.S. 1.4 million visas were issued out of the embassy. This is phenomenal. So I think the whole people-to-people relationship and building on that is extremely important. We have common defense issues that are needed, particularly in the South, but throughout. In some ways, we have a common enemy, one that's on the border of India, and obviously we have our own issues with China. So that will bring us closer together. Think about 10, 20 years ago, defense spending from India at the U.S. was basically zero, and now it is over $200 billion that's being spent. So all of this is very positive, and I think that will continue to be. And then, of course, we have common interest in AI, cybersecurity, financial interest being connected to the global network. So I think there's a lot of areas that we will continue working together on.
I think that sounds pretty positive also for the relationship to continue this time. And for a couple of people had mentioned there was a little bit of skepticism and cynicism. But people forget, it was very friendly, then it became a little skeptical, now it's back to being friendly. But I think you're pointing to that the trajectory looks upward from now on.
Yes, I think going forward that, yes, we have a lot of common interest to work toward.
So if you think about global investments, any trends that you're watching as you look forward that you're paying attention to, Henry?
Well, I'm sitting up here with a gentleman running one of the biggest and best known tech companies in the world. So I should ask you that question, not asking me that question. But John Chambers said in the introduction earlier, and I agree 100%, AI is the most important thing to come along, and it is going to grow much faster, much bigger than the internet itself. And I couldn't agree more with that whole sentiment and what that means for companies. There's a wonderful saying that General Shinseki, who used to be Chief of Staff of the Army, would say. He said, if you don't like change, you're going to like obsolescence a lot less. And you think about it, and that's exactly right. That's what AI is going to do. So many people are afraid of AI. It's going to put everybody out of work. I don't believe that. Actually, I think it's going to create more jobs, different kind of jobs. Productivity is finally starting to go back up again because of technology, which for the longest time we didn't have much productivity growth in the U.S. So I see that as a real positive, yes.
So final question, Henry. So as we think about it, is there any personal experience or anecdote that shaped your worldview of sort of what you are today and how you choose to invest and how you choose to act?
Wow, that's a big question. I think, look, to me, there's opportunity everywhere. And you just have to look for it. And you've got to look for it and invest when nobody wants to invest. It's easy to follow a trend and just go with it. That's the easy part. The harder part is going against when everything looks bad. Take the global financial crisis. I don't think there's anybody in this room, and I certainly did not expect a financial crisis as deep and as frightening as that was. And during that time, we told everybody at KKR, focus on what you can control, because there's so much noise in the system and there's a lot of stuff that none of us can control. But focus on what you can control, which in our case were the investments that we had. Focus on those companies, get the debt down as fast as you can, cut the cost as fast as you can, and be ready to invest big time when we come out of this, because we will come out of it. Don't know when or how, but we will come out of it. I think that has changed my thinking a lot. You have to always look at what's the downside, but I'm an optimist. And you always try to find, the silver lining in everything that we do. I'd say there's one thing, and I want to just comment about this because it made a huge difference in how I think, how my partner George Roberts thinks. And that was when we started KKR in 1976. He and I didn't have any money. We each put up $10,000. And to start KKR with Jerry Kohlberg, and Jerry had a little more. He was 19 years old, where he put up $100,000. But the second conversation that we had was the most transformative conversation in my view, and it really shaped what KKR is today, and that was what kind of culture did we want to have? And we made the decision that we wanted to have a culture where everybody at the firm participated in everything we did, whether you were a partner at the firm or you weren't a partner, whether you worked on a transaction or you didn't. And that was very important. And why was we wanted to get the best thinking out of everybody. If we called anybody at the firm, we didn't want anybody saying, gee, I'm too busy, because they knew, why would I go work and help over here, because I'm only going to get paid on what I do. And we came from a culture like that at Bear Stearns, and we wanted something totally different. We wanted a culture where everybody participated, everybody shared in the risk and in the reward that came out of it. And that's what KKR is today. We've taken KKR from $120,000 when we started, and today we have a little over $100 billion of market cap. And it's the same culture we have today that we started with 48 years ago. So that's the transformative thing for me.
I agree. Lots of lessons. Let's thank Henry once again for his leadership and for his insights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kravis and Mr. Krishna. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the conversation portion of the evening.